Okay, hello everyone. My name is Thomas Newman, and I'm gate crashing Louise's webinar tonight just for 5-10 minutes because I just want to talk through some of the MCS course options that Viva Financial Tuition has for the February 2024 MCS. So tonight's webinar is completely free. Louise is going to be talking you through some of the key points in relation to the February 2024 MCS, and this session is being recorded, so if you want to view a replay, we're going to make that available in the next day or two. A member of the Viva team will send an email after this session with the recording. Please feel free to share it with anyone you know who's taking the MCS, because I think it's a high value session. And as I said, this is a free session. What I want to talk about just for a few minutes is for those of you who are interested in taking the exam in February, maybe it's the first time you're taking an exam, maybe you're repeating. We have a number of course options at Viva that I think will suit different students' needs. So I'll just talk through those because, as I said, for those of you who are interested in taking a course, and it is a very good idea to take a course, it greatly improves your chances of passing and makes the whole experience, I think, a little bit more enjoyable. I'm going to share my screen now and just show you some of the course options that we have at Viva. So let me see now. Okay, so you should be able to see that. So you should be looking at the management case study page, course page at vivatuition.com. So I'll share these links with you in the chat box after I finish. So basically, these are the course options if you want to purchase a course from Viva Financial Tuition as they relate to the management case study. So there are a couple of good options, we think. First of all, it's worth mentioning, I should have mentioned this initially, I'm the CEO and founder of Viva Financial Tuition. My name is Thomas Newman. Viva's been around for 7 years, and over that period, we've really specialized in the CIMA case study exams, and that's where we've really built our reputation. We've got a number of awards from CIMA itself. The latest is the 2023 Global Pass Rate Excellence Award, which means that for our courses, students who've taken those courses have achieved in excess of the global average pass rate. So we're very, very proud of that. Not many tuition providers make it onto that list. And we've also got very, very good reviews from our students. We've had world prize winning students, I think pretty much in every window from last year and before that as well. So we know what we're at with the case study, especially, I would say. Go check out our reviews on Trustpilot, which is a third-party review site. 4.9 out of 5. You can read some of the student reviews there, people who have taken courses with us, and I think generally they're very, very pleased. So I'll send you the link to this MCS course page after the session, as I said. There you can see the different features included in the MCS courses that we have. We've got a mix of recorded content and mock exams and live sessions. Louise is your tutor, and she can give you a little bit of an introduction later on about her background. She's been the MCS tutor for a little while at Viva, and students are absolutely thrilled with her. We're absolutely thrilled with her. She's an exceptionally good tutor, and really knows what she's talking about. So you're in very, very safe hands there. Mock exams, there are 5 of them. They all come with model solutions. Depending on the course option you would take, you can get marking included, or you can just get the model solutions to guide you. So there's a whole range of on-demand video lectures that we have covering the pre-scene analysis as it relates to pre-scene relevant for this exam. The mock exams, they're all tailored to this case study, so they're based on this pre-scene, the same with the solutions. There are video lectures on the P2, F2, E2 theories as they apply again to this pre-scene. So there is a ton of work that went into the creation of the content. We spend a lot of time getting the content right, and we have a lot of experience at making content for the MCS. So I'll talk about the different course options. There you've got more detail on the specifics of the different courses. Okay, so there's a lot of content there. It's very, very exam focused, very practical. So we really try hard not to include any fluff or padding in these courses. We try to ensure that they're streamlined and exactly what you need to get a pass. So, you know, we're the February 2024 window here. If you're buying a standalone MCS course, we have two flavors of that. So if you want to buy just one course, there is the standard course option and there is the elite course option. So you'll see the differences outlined basically here. With the standard course option, you have these features. You've got recorded on-demand video lectures covering the pre-scene analysis and industry analysis. We apply E2, F2, and P2 theories to the case and talk through likely exam scenarios and how you would solve those. There are 5 mock exams with model solutions for each of those, all based on this pre-scene. There are downloadable course notes, and there are objective theory reviews. So if you need a refresher in E2, F2, P2, or maybe you haven't done it, maybe you're doing the FLP route, they're really good videos to review. With the elite course option, really there's a lot more in the way of personalization and services added on top of this content. So you get a lot more time with Louise. She does interactive workshop sessions. There are 6 of those. They're 2 hours each, very exam focused. So she would be talking you through a number of mock debriefs. So for each one of the 5 mocks you do, she would talk you through that mock, break it down section by section. There's a lot of guidance on what exactly you need to do to pass, what the examiner is looking for, how you put yourself in the role of the finance manager, which is what you're meant to do for this exam. All of your mocks in the elite course are marked, so you get personalized feedback on your strengths, your weaknesses, and you got scores per section and per area. There's a community where you can interact with Louise on an ongoing basis, which is really, really useful. And you can also interact with your fellow students, which is also a great way to learn. There are debrief lessons, exam technique sessions, and there's a pass guarantee. Okay, so if you don't pass this exam, we think there is no reason, if you go through this course, that you should not pass. But just in case you take the exam and you don't pass, then you get free access to the next course, which would be for May 2024, which is reassurance for you. So, you know, the 2 options here, you know, we recognize always that, you know, students have to pay a lot for these courses, but these price points are very, very competitive. If you look at other tuition providers and the options they give, we think these courses are as good as any on the market. And because we're an 100% online tuition provider, and we always have been for the last 7 years since inception, that's the way we've operated. We've kept a lean team, and we focus on, I think, the right things, and we can keep prices down. So for courses like the elite option we have here, we think it's as good as anything out there in terms of MCS courses. But these courses tend to go for in excess of £1,000. The standard option is much more cost effective. So if you're happier to sort of work through things on your own, there's a lot of good content there, and that's £249. So a really good option as well. There is the possibility, if you opt for the elite course, to also pay in installments. So you can pay the $699 up front, or if you want to pay in installments and spread them out over 6-7 months, you would pay an initial deposit of £99 and you would pay 7 installments of £100. So the total would be a little bit higher, $799. So you can go for that option too if you're interested in a very, very in-depth course like the elite course. Okay, so there are 2 really good options, I think, if you're looking for a standalone course. Now, The other option that we have, and it's our most popular option, I think for good reason, is something called All Access membership. Okay, so I'm just going to flip over to this. Okay, so I'll also share this link later on. So it's vivatuition.com/CIMA/all access. And this is a real value for money offering. A lot of our students like this because what it does is it gives you 12 months of access to all 12 CIMA standard courses. So not just the MCS standard course that you see here, which costs £249 on its own. But it gives you that, but it also gives you the E1 standard course, E2, E3, P1, P2, P3, F1, F2, F3, and the 3 case studies. So this is very, very useful, you know, for the MCS. If you want to go back on theory in a more in-depth fashion for E2, F2, P2, maybe you had some exemptions there and you want to go back on that theory, or maybe you had difficulty with some of those, or maybe it's a long time since you did those courses and exams, you can dip into the E2, F2 and P2 courses. And the other thing is that, you know, you're obviously planning to pass the MCS for February. So if you progress then to the next level and you want to take the strategic level objective tests, so E3, F3, P3, or the SCS, for example, soon, maybe you want to take it as soon as May or August, well, the All Access package is very, very good for that too. So currently that's discounted to £349. It's usually going for £399. So that's a really, really good value for money option. Again, if you want to sort of work through things yourself, it's excellent value for money, as I said. So I'll share those 2 links with you later on. And, you know, you're going to get access to all of the content we've created so far, that Louise has created in conjunction with the writers at Viva Tuition. You know, you'll see that there's a lot of content in the MCS area covering reviews of the main theories from E2, F2, P2. There are a series of videos on preparing for the case, you know, putting yourself in the role of a finance manager, how to actually use the pre-scene and apply it, how to apply theory, etc. What exam day strategy you have, how do you manage your time well? That's a real concern that students have. And there are easy marks you can win, and that shouldn't be ignored either. So there are lots of really good tips there. How do you avoid the obvious errors that come up again and again and again? These are, you know, surprising errors, but the examiner is always mentioning them. And we demonstrate what a good answer would look like on the day of the exam versus what a bad answer would look like. So really, really exam focused. And then there's a whole series of videos on the pre-scene analysis. There are 10 of those, I think, that Louise did before. There's an industry analysis, the E2, P2, F2 applied videos there. So, you know, you take investment appraisal as it applies to this pre-scene, transfer pricing as it applies to this pre-scene. Really, really useful. So there's a lot of content there. And as I said, 5 mock exams as well with model solutions, which is really worth its weight in gold. So, you know, they're the course options we have. I'm going to send the links to you after the webinar. I'll probably put them in the chat box here as well. I would encourage you to go through them, and feel free to share them, obviously, with anyone you know who's taking the MCS. They're excellent courses. You know, they're good options. I think all of them. The standard course of the All Access membership would suit certain students, while a student that is looking maybe for a lot of attention would be well suited to the elite course, or maybe a student that is looking to do very, very well on the exam. The elite course would probably be the better option. So I think there's something there for different student profiles. I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to hand over to Louise now, and I'll hang around for a few minutes because maybe there are some questions, doubts about the course options there that I can help with. But I think that's it from me. So enjoy the session with Louise. Louise, best of luck, and I'm going to try now not to.
Thank you, Thomas.
I'm going to try not to make a mess of this and close the whole thing down. Let's see. I've got to make you the host again. Let's see. have it. Okay, so you're the host now, Louise.
Lovely. There we go.
Hi, Louise.
Hello. Hi, everybody. Super. So I can share my screen, and that should be good. Okay, then. So I'm hoping everybody, nice to meet you all, everybody. And I'm hoping you can see my screen with mastering the February 24 MCS. So I've put my face up there so that you can see what I look like. I'm not going to leave the video on for the rest of this session because it probably doesn't really help you to look at my face. It's probably better if you look at the actual presentation. But I wanted you to see who I am. I don't think there's anything worse than having someone talking and you don't know who they are. So I'm Louise. So I have been teaching CIMA case study for many, many, many years. So ever since CIMA first had a case study all those years ago, I've been teaching it. And I've been teaching for so long, I've also covered all of the E pillar, the F pillar, P pillar at some point in my teaching time. So I love teaching case. I think it's a fantastic exam, and I'm delighted to be doing it too at Viva, really. So this evening, what we're going to do is we're going to run through just this sort of essentials, just to get you on the right road, to make sure that you know what you need to do really in order to be successful in this exam. And as Thomas has said, the courses that we offer, are great. And I'm the tutor who's done all of the recorded things for this case. And I'm the live tutor for the elite group. So really hoping that some of you will carry on with me. So I'm just going to switch off my video at the moment. Hopefully. Well, why will it not let me do that? I don't know. Wait a minute. There we go. Okay, so let us move on then. So to our PowerPoint slides, what are we going to cover today? So we've got limited time. I'm really going to have to rein myself in because I get very excited about case. But obviously for today's session, we've got limited time. So what we're going to do first of all is we're going to look at the pre-scene information. We'll pull out some of the key points about it. And before we do that, we'll just understand why we need to know about the pre-scene information. Then we'll think about what are those key theories from P2, F2 and E2 that you really must make sure that you know well enough to be able to apply them to cut car. So in the exam, you will have to apply knowledge that you have, hopefully, from E2, P2 and F2, but you are going to be applying it to cut car. But obviously you can't apply it unless you actually know it. So we'll look at those key theories. And then finally, we'll go through an action plan. So what do you really need to make sure that you do over the next few weeks in order to actually be successful in the exam? At the end, we'll have a little gap for questions. So if you've got any questions, if you could save them till the end, and then I'll happily answer them at the end. I'll put my camera back on and I'll happily answer any questions. But when we go through these different parts of the presentations, if you could just make a note of your question and then we can come back onto them at the end. Okay, then. Off we go, first of all, pre-scene information. Now, what I want to say, first of all, is why do we need to know about the pre-scene? Because on exam day, you are going to get extra information about that car, and it might bring us up to date with things that have happened since we received that pre-scene information. So there will be new information. So why do we need to know about the pre-scene? So I think there are 4 really good reasons why we need to know about the pre-scene. First one, you really have to feel absolutely comfortable as a finance manager, as if you actually did work at Cut Car. If someone asked you about how many different dealerships have we got, how many different staff are there, what happens in a specific dealership, what was our turnover last year, you ought to feel comfortable that I know those things. So you need to feel really comfortable, because if you don't feel comfortable about Cut Car, how are you going to answer a question about it? You might say things that are just plainly wrong. So the first reason for understanding the pre-scene information, to feel happy and confident and comfortable as if you actually work there. Right, second reason, that we need to know the pre-scene is because in the exam, you have to apply theory that you know to cup car. And what that means is that you actually have to know what's relevant about cup car. So what do I know about cup car that might, for example, be relevant to transfer pricing? What do I know about cup car that might be a situation where negotiation is important? So we need to be able to apply that E2F2P2 knowledge. So we need to really understand what we're given in the pre-scene. Third reason we need to know the pre-scene is because in the exam, when we're writing an answer, we must actually bring in points from the pre-scene information and the information we're given on the day. We need to link a theoretical point that we want to make back to something actually that we know about car. And if we don't know about cup car, we can't do that. We are not answering a theoretical question. So the objective testing exams at E2F2P2, they tested your theoretical knowledge. We're not doing that with our case exam. We must relate it back to cup car. So we need to know about that information about cup car. Final reason for knowing that pre-scene well is because if you know it well, you can start to guess what kind of questions they could actually ask in the exam. You could guess what scenarios might have happened to cup car. What has happened in the last sort of month since we've read the pre-scene? What could they have done that they might ask you about in the exam? So for all those reasons, the pre-scene is really, really important. Okay, so let's have a look at some of those key things that we probably already know. And if we don't, we certainly should know about a car. So first of all, it's a car dealership. We should know that. It's got 214 dealerships across this country called Welland. Key point, it's only in Welland at the moment. It's not got any dealerships in any overseas countries, but that's at the moment. What if in the MOT, suddenly there is the opportunity for car to acquire another dealership in another country? How would we consolidate that? I'm thinking F2. What might we have to think about in terms of IT systems, in terms of communication and teamwork? So how about there is a possibility? So as I said to you, when we see things in the pre-scene, it can help us to say, well, what could happen in the mock exam? What might have happened to cup car? So 214 dealerships spread across Welland. It uses the Welland dollar as its currency and was founded in 1964 and quoted on the stock exchange in 1998. So important point, it's listed. It's a listed company. Now, we should know from F2 that there are some accounting standards that are relevant to listed companies. So I'd be wanting to make sure that I knew what those were, because, of course, if you get a question, you will get a question, of course, on F2, and it could be something to do with those accounting standards. Now, Cup Car is one of the largest car dealers in Welland in terms of revenue and dealerships. So it's 214 dealerships spread around the country. And what that might make you think is it's a big player, one of the biggest. But this is going to be a very competitive marketplace. 214 dealerships around the country, and then loads of other dealers as well. It's going to be very competitive in Welland. So perhaps why they might decide to go overseas. Now, each dealership sells both new and used cars. Really important that you get. There is different profitability from those two different things. And also, if you think about it, when selling a new car, well, everybody else is selling the same model of that car. So there's a lot of competition selling new cars. Selling used cars, well, used cars are all different, aren't they? People have had different things done to their car before they then sell it as a used car. So used cars are all a bit different. And indeed, Cup Car makes more of a profit on those used cars. Now, that's quite important. We need to understand the contribution that the new and the used cars make. What if in the exam there was a suggestion to stop selling used cars? We need to talk sensibly about that. Now, they also sell other related products and services, which we'll come on to in a later slide. Okay, then. So the operations, they have at least 2 dealerships for each popular car brand. So think of all those car brands you know. Car has at least 2 dealerships for every one of those. So they're competing with all the other dealers who have the same makes of cars in some of their dealerships. In each dealership, well, it looks probably, I imagine it, very like on screen. It's a large building, modern, creates a positive impression. Probably looks like this with glass and nice big car park, shiny looking, really nice. It has a workshop inside for servicing and repairing new cars. Now, that's quite important because not only does it retail, it sells cars, but it also has a workshop. So it has all the equipment, it has all the elements of workflow going on. It has things to consider like quality of what it does, quality management. They have to source parts, they have to have stock of parts. So that workshop really creates another whole area to think about. They have some business managers, one in each dealership, and they offer financing to customers who want to acquire a car on a loan. And currently, I think they arrange all their financing, from what I remember, through the Bank of Welland. But again, in the exam, perhaps there's a suggestion that they team up with some other financing organisation. They offer servicing and warranty packages. So they can earn commission from selling warranties and they can sell servicing contracts. So there's other areas of service that they offer on which they earn commissions. Okay, then. There's one person in charge of each dealership. That's the principal, the dealership principal, and they oversee each dealership. And they have, very important point, they have discretion over operational matters. So we could see that a particular one of the 214 dealerships is perhaps doing remarkably well in a certain aspect of the business. Why is that? How are they doing that? Because the principal has the power to make his own decisions, he might be running things a bit differently from some of the other principals. So we could see different ideas about how some of these dealers are run, and perhaps we can look at things like sort of benchmarking and considering how we might be able to improve some of the other dealerships by actually doing the same types of things. We could see some dealerships where they are struggling, where there's problems, morale problems, leadership issues, management issues. Okay. Now, if we move on to look at the products, so we said new cars and used cars. So new cars, as we know, each popular brand of car, Top Car, has at least 2 dealerships. Company is in huge competition then with other car dealers for new car sales. Now, in the exam, what about the possibility of a new car manufacturer wanting to make a contract with Cup Car so that Cup Car can set up 2 or 3 new dealerships to sell their make of car? Now, that's new cars, and I said it's really competitive. If we think about used cars for a minute, well, Cup Car earns more profit from used cars than it does from new cars. Now, there's a point then. What if in that exam, there is a suggestion that let's stop selling used cars? It takes up space in that dealership. It requires complexity because we have to buy in the cars. We have to make sure they're good quality. Let's not do that. And that could be a proposal. But what would Cup Car lose if they don't sell used cars? The staff who work at Cup Car are encouraged to offer generous valuations for part exchanges. So when they sell a new car to a customer, they offer generous amounts for that customer's existing car. But then, again, we have problems here. We have a bit of conflict because the more we pay the customer for their car, their current car, well, the higher that cost is then for when we then want to resell that as a used car. So we are squeezing our own margins, really. So there's a balance to be had there, isn't there, between offering the customer a really good price for their current car, but not so high that we reduce the profitability of then selling that car on as a used car. Now, we also have our workshop, and we therefore have to have parts so that we can do repairs and we can do servicing. We have to maintain detailed records of all the cars we sell and all of the servicing that we do. And if you think for a minute about sort of legal issues and potential problems, what if there was a problem with some repairs or servicing that we have done on a car? I mean, the reputational risk springs to mind. Being sued springs to mind. The cost of that, having to set up F2, a provision to perhaps pay compensation, or a provision for a warranty claim. So touching on some F2 things there, just thinking about, the potential implications, because we have a workshop and we do work on cars. Failure to have a car serviced properly could invalidate a manufacturer's warranty. So that's very important for Car to follow the manufacturer's guidance on how to do a service. So any cutting of corners by Car could cause massive problems for the customer, which in turn, I think, would cause massive problems for Car, who, remember, they have nice, gleaming car dealerships. They create a good impression. They have a strong brand. They focus on quality. They do not want any kind of reputational issues. Now, finance and insurance is another source of income because, remember, Car receives commissions for referring customers to services. If they offer, for example, extended warranties or service plans or financing, Car earns a commission. Now, that's a nice source of income. It's a nice little source of income that rolls along in the background. But there could be in the exam proposals to make changes to that. And we need to be ready for the possibility of that. Okay, then. So what's the structure? So the original founders of the company have long since gone, the Cup family, sold their interest in it. And as we know, it's now a listed company. So it will have all of those large institutional investors as well as members of the public. It has a significant executive team, so CEO, COO, marketing director, IT director, and finance director. And when I look at that list, one thing that does spring to mind to me is, where is the HR director? Because an organisation with 214 dealerships, with the number of staff in each of those that it has a lot of staff. So I'm a bit intrigued as to why there isn't an HR director. And I think perhaps there could be or should be. I'm also thinking, is there any form of internal audit function? And I'm thinking about all the different roles that this team will have, particularly thinking about the importance of marketing, brand image of Car, the PR, the advertising that they might do, fighting to have competitive advantage. So a lot there for the marketing director to be thinking about. I'm thinking IT systems, keeping the details of all those cars they've sold, the repairs and the servicing, having inventory systems to keep a track of used cars and new cars, and also an inventory system for all the parts. I'm thinking also about data analytics and the use of data analytics to analyze sales and also to analyze what's going on in the marketplace in general. And then I'm getting very excited about the possibility of things like virtual reality headsets for looking at your car, for artificial intelligence, for perhaps working out what the best model of a car might be for a certain type of customer. So I'm just throwing ideas here because when you read the pre-scene, you need to be thinking, what kind of things could they possibly ask me on exam day? Now, there are 5 non-exec directors, and that's good, isn't it, for governance? For governance, oversight, independence, transparency, non-exec directors. And they're going to be wanting to, oversee that things are being run well at CupCar. And again, we might find in the exam that there's something that actually perhaps isn't running very well at CupCar, and we're going to have to suggest ways to deal with that. Now, the business model is something that's really regularly tested. And in the pre-scene, we know that there is a business model given to us. So in terms of defining value, what is it that CupCar's doing? Well, as we know, they're selling cars to customers, and they're offering a positive experience both to used and new car buyers. So the customer are the people who buy the cars. But wouldn't you also say, because I think I would, that in a certain way, the manufacturers are also a customer of CupCar, because the manufacturers want CupCar to create a good impression for their brand, have good customer service for their brand. So for me, it's about relationships with both the purchasing customer and also the relationships with the manufacturer. How do they create value? By having an ongoing relationship with their customer. They don't just sell a car. They sell a car to a customer, and then they want that customer to come back for servicing, to come back to have some additional things added onto the car, to come back when they want to change their car and to sell their existing car back to CupCar. What they really want to do is to keep that customer for the life of that customer and create lots of additional income from that relationship. How do they deliver value? Well, it's through that excellence of customer service. It's about the other offerings they have, the online presence, the fact that you can book your repair or servicing online. Perhaps you can order your car online. It's all those different ways that they actually deliver things that add value to the customer. Capturing the residual value is all about selling in high volumes, offering a wide range of new and used cars, and gaining those other incomes from things like commissions from selling warranties or service packages. That's also capturing that residual value. Now, the business model has been so regularly tested in previous sittings of this exam. Really important for you to understand it, and for you to think, if there was a change in what they do, if something new is proposed for CupCar to do, or if there's a different way that's proposed of doing something, how would that impact on the business model? Would it add value, or would it actually destroy value? Okay, then. Now, the supplementary information in the pre-scene tells us about Miltro Motors, which is a competitor. Now, that's interesting for 2 reasons, I think. We can compare CupCar to Miltro. We can say, is there anything in the financials, information, that makes us think that CupCar is a bit different? Is it doing better? Is it doing worse? Is it more highly geared? Is it less geared? We can do that, and that's a useful thing to do. But the other reason for thinking about why is the competitor in our pre-scene, because perhaps that competitor could actually be an acquisition target. Perhaps there's the possibility of acquiring Miltro. And then we go into F2, don't we? And consolidations. And we'll also go into perhaps negotiation for negotiating with the owners of Miltro. So some interesting ideas really coming from this sort of supplementary information. Okay, then. Majority of the revenue comes from new cars, 41%. But remember, it's not the most profitable part of the business. Parts and service contribute the most to the company's gross profit. So we don't want to do anything which could start to destroy that. We don't want any bad reputational quality issues with our servicing, any parts problems. We want our IT systems to be really good at making sure we have the right parts in stock when we need them. Now, electric car sales in Welland are slow because of limited charging points. Now, I know you are all dotted about in different countries. I know that this is a statement that I could absolutely say about the UK. electric car sales in the UK are not as good as they could be. They're not as good as other parts of mainland Europe. Why is that? Because we at the moment do not have a widely spread, reliable charging infrastructure. Now, what does that mean for Cup Car? I think it means all sorts of possibilities for the exam. So Cup Car could be asked to sell electric cars. An electric car manufacturer wants to do a deal with Cup Car to sell electric cars. Great opportunity, but will the sales actually be sufficient if there is this slowness in the take-up of electric cars in Welland? So we could be asked if we want to sell them by an electric car manufacturer. We could think of things a bit more radically. What if Cup Car decides in its 214 dealerships, it could set aside some space in the car park to actually set up some charging infrastructure? Imagine charging infrastructure now dotted about 214 different locations right the way across Welland. That actually might be something that the government of Welland would even contribute to, because they want to encourage electric car sales. So we have to be ready for those kind of possibilities. Okay, margins on new car sales are small, we mentioned that, but something that I don't think's really emphasised in the pre-scene, really important, we know, we've realised it, is that not only when we sell a new car, obviously we get the money from the customer, but the manufacturer of new car sets us targets. And if we, Cup Car, sell a certain number of new cars for that car manufacturer, we will get a bonus, an incentive. Now, at the moment, from the pre-scene, we don't know how much of our income that actually is. But if by hitting these targets, actually that could be a significant element of Cup Car's income. So anything which causes us not to hit those targets could be problematic for Cup Car's income. And also, again, this makes me think about contractual matters and negotiation, because if there's a new car we're going to sell, a new manufacturer we're going to sell the cars of, we need to negotiate a decent incentive scheme. So negotiation just springs to mind there. Goal congruence and conflict and self-interest are issues in the car dealership. I don't know if you've picked up on the fact that, well, as we've already mentioned, there's a conflict between how much you would offer a customer to buy their existing car in part exchange. So the new car salesman wants to offer them lots of money for their existing car, so he makes his new car sale. But of course, the used car managers within the dealership, well, they've got to sell that used car. And if it's bought at a high price, it means it's going to squeeze their margins. So there is already conflict and problems with making sure that everybody in the dealership is working in the same direction. There's also different bonus schemes going on. So many of the staff, you'll have read, have a bonus scheme based on what they actually manage to sell. But the staff in the workshops don't have any formal bonus scheme. So there's another conflict area that perhaps would be looked at in the exam. Okay, then. Any useful information from the finances? Well, actually, I don't think the finances actually give us a huge amount. What they said was that revenues have increased by 5%, which is less than Miltro's revenue growth. So, we're growing quite well. And for a well-established, large player in the market that's probably reached stability, not growing rapidly now, fiercely competitive marketplace, actually that growth is good. So it is growing its revenues, its profits increasing 6.6% on the previous year. Operating profit margins grew from 15.8 to 16%, while Miltro's same margin declined a bit. So again, we're doing better than our next competitor. But that's all looking good. Our profits after tax increased by almost 6% against the previous year. And this is an interesting point. Did you notice that virtually all of the annual profit is paid out as a dividend? 97% of the year 22's profit after tax was paid out as a dividend. Now, why is that quite important? Because I guess that's the shareholders' expectations. But if there's going to be some big new investment needed, then perhaps Car will have to keep that cash, not give out such a big dividend in order to invest it. So we might be looking at some communication with shareholders needed about the need to not pay out such a large dividend. Again, there could be some conflict about that. Okay. Now then, what you must do is you must look at some of those key ratios. Make sure that you can calculate the key ratios. And the reason for doing this, of course, is because it might be that when we get into the exam, there's some suggestion about something that CUPCAR is going to do, and they might give us some financial information. We might then be able to calculate what impact that might have on some existing ratios. Now, remember, in this exam, we're not going to be asked to calculate certain ratios. You know, that's all, you've done that before in your objective testing exams. This is more for you to realise that there might be a ratio you ought to be able to calculate, which would tell you something. So, for example, if in the exam there's going to be a big new investment by CUPCAR, let's say they are going to invest in electric car charging infrastructure. So they're going to put a lot of money into that, and they're going to take out a big loan. If I see that in the exam, I could then start to think, how will that impact on gearing? I need to be able to see what the gearing ratio is now, see what it would be with this extra loan, and that might be something worthy of me discussing in the exam. If it asks me for the advantages and disadvantages of funding this through loan or shares, then there might be a disadvantage if the gearing suddenly goes up dramatically. So these ratios are for you to realise when they might be useful for you to now calculate. So gross profit margin there, we've calculated these for you. We can see what they're looking like. As we said, slight improvement in the gross profit margin and in the operating profit margin and in the net profit margin. Cash conversion cycle, improving, as we can see. And the gearing at the moment is, we've said improving position, but actually, too lower gearing isn't good, just as much as too higher gearing isn't good. Where would I say they are at the moment? Well, interestingly, I think this is pretty similar to Miltro's gearing. So it's probably about industry average. So I would say at the moment, they're probably middle ground with the gearing. Quite possible, it has been tested many times in previous years, that they ask you for the pros and cons of additional funding through equity or debt. And again, you could then recalculate gearing, and you might find, it's gone up to 35%. What would you say about that? I'd probably say, well, it's increased, and some investors therefore might perceive CUPCAR to be more risky. However, it's not at a particularly high level if it only went up to 35%. So I wanted to do that kind of discussion. Okay, potential scenarios. So they could expand, couldn't they, into a new country to sell cars. That would bring consolidations up. It would bring currency and translation of an overseas subsidiary up. And by the way, can I say something about F2? It is, by the examiner's own post-exam reports, F2 is also always the one where students perform the least well. So when you've got a requirement in the exam and it's based on your F2 knowledge, the examiner says, there is a big lack of knowledge shown. So F2, absolutely vital that you make sure you do really fully understand what you learnt in F2 so that you could write about it. So you could explain how an overseas subsidiary would impact on the consolidated financial statement. Okay, there could be some new revenue streams perhaps in the exam. They could offer new services. So they could offer rent cars. That's not a bad idea. There's 214 dealerships. They could offer rental cars from all of those. You could rent a car, drop it off at a different one of the dealerships. They could offer other kinds of services. So perhaps they'll offer some kind of personalization, some kind of paint spraying that can be done. Perhaps they'll have some kind of more kinds of accessories with the Cup Car brand on. All kinds of different revenue streams could be suggested. They might acquire another company. So that could be Miltro, perhaps. It could be completely unrelated business completely. They could diversify into a different area. They could think about their structure a bit more. They could decide on setting up each of the dealerships as an investment centre or profit centre. What kind of way at the moment are they managing and incentivizing those principles? And we don't really know at the moment how they do that. So they might decide to restructure. They could bring in regional managers. They could remove some of the principles. So there's lots of possibilities. And you need to think about all the different areas of E2, P2 and F2 that might be relevant to that. Okay, now then, let's touch on a few of the key theories then. Now, first thing I want to say about this is not a complete list of theories you need to know. This is some of the key theories that you could easily see being tested in Cup Car's case, but that does not mean that other theories would not be tested. Okay, so a note of caution with what's coming up, but you must make sure that P2, make sure that you are all over P2 because it is the lead paper for MCS. What does that mean? It means in the exam, you're going to get 8 separate questions, tasks. There's 8. You've got 3 underpinning subjects, E2, P2, F2. Quite clearly, you've got more than 2 questions for each paper, but not for all of them. So this is where we are likely to find we've got 3, perhaps, or 4 MCS requirement, and perhaps 2 of the others. So you're going to get more testing on P2. Okay. Make sure we are absolutely fine about the different possible ways of setting up Cup Car with responsibility centres. Cost centres or profit centres or investment centres, what would that mean? Would it be appropriate? What is controllable by each of the dealerships? So responsibility centres. What about risk and uncertainty? If there's something proposed in the exam, it is quite possible that they're going to ask you about risk. And we might need to talk about how we could deal with that. Stress testing has been tested in past exam papers. The use of sensitivity analysis, we need to be fully aware about explaining these. Now, remember, you're not going to be given big calculations to do. You're not going to have to draw up a big decision tree, but you might have to explain the benefits or limitations of some of these techniques, how they might be used. Quality management. What about the workshop? What about the possibility of TQM or just in time or business process reengineering? That's been tested quite recently. Would you be able to talk about those, understand what the theory is, but then relate them to how they could benefit Cup Car? Pricing strategy is really important. How do Cup Car price their cars? What are the different pricing strategies they could use? If they introduce a completely new revenue stream, then they could think from scratch about the pricing strategies. So could you talk about different pricing strategies and how they might or might not be applicable? Transfer pricing, definitely possible here because Cup Car does transfer cars between dealerships. It also will transfer parts between workshops. And therefore, the whole issue of how to set an appropriate transfer price, what would be motivating, what might be demotivating, what would be appropriate, that could well be tested. Cost management, setting budgets, KPIs, value chain analysis, all possibilities. Different approaches to investment appraisal. What are the pros and cons? What would be appropriate for Cup Car to use if they gave you a certain potential investment that they're thinking of in the exam? And finally, as with cost management, part of cost management really, but target costing as well. So all of those areas, just some of the topics that could be tested. I like to think of it as you need to have the basic essentials of all these. You need to have the key bullet points, the key lists, the advantages, the disadvantages, the key lists of the top 4 characteristics of what this is about. And then you would need to apply it to CUPCAR. Explain how it would benefit them. Okay, 2. Right, remember what this one is. This one is the one the examiner says students don't do very well. Students mess up the F2 tasks, and you will get 2 of them, at least. You will definitely get 2. So make sure that you can actually write down in words how you deal with all the accounting standards, you know, how to account for things, how you consolidate. You must be able to explain it, because that's what you would have to do. If they decide they're going to sell a different product or service, well, there might be revenue recognition issues. I'm already thinking there are revenue recognition potential issues, because if they sell a 3-year service contract, and if a customer paid up front for it for the full 3 years, we've clearly got revenue recognition to deal with. All of that money cannot be taken to revenue. We're going to have to treat some of it as deferred income. You need to be able to talk about that. So let's think about the key elements of F2. So sources of finance, regularly tested. Pros and cons of debt or equity. Consolidations. You must be able to explain the key elements of consolidation, the key adjustments. You must understand them so that you can see when they're relevant and when you need to discuss them. That would include, by the way, overseas subsidiaries and foreign currency. Revenue recognition, absolutely, definitely. You can see, I hope, could easily be asked, because if there's any suggestion about a new type of product or service that's going to bring in revenue, the accountant's going to have to account for it. IS 37 and provisions for product recalls. What if they need to recall a load of the cars? There could be a provision for that recall, for the work that needs to be done on it. Provisions for warranties. If they're selling 3-year warranties, they need to provide for the cost of fixing the cars under the 3-year warranties. What if somebody has an accident at work, one of the staff? Then potential provision for some form of compensation. Interpretation of financial statements. Again, what if they gave you an acquisition target and they gave you some financial information? Would you be able to pull out key ratios to be able to explain whether you think this company is a good target or not? What about things like integrated reporting, regularly tested? Would you be able to explain the 6 capitals that should be included in an integrated report? Would you be able to explain why it would be beneficial to produce an integrated report? Intangible assets. What about things like licenses? What if the government of Welland gives CUPCAR a license to develop electric vehicle charging points in their 214 dealership car parks? A license is an intangible asset. How should that be accounted for? What about patents? Weighted average cost of capital, regularly tested again. Could you explain how the WACC would be affected if there was different sources of funding for a certain investment suggested in the exam? Would you be able to explain the impact of CUPCAR if the WACC changed? What does that matter? How is the WACC used? Why does it matter if it goes up or goes down? So WACC has been regularly tested, really important for you to make sure that you are happy with being able to explain how it is calculated, and then explain how a change in share price or funding might affect the WACC. Okay, over to E2. Again, heavily tested in MCS. You know, you are going to get 2 tasks, if not 3. So what kind of areas? I mean, I think quite frankly, anything in E2 could come up, but some of the ones that have come up regularly, so this one most definitely, changes in the business model. A new proposal is made in the exam, and you need to think about how that could affect the existing business model. Would it add more value? Would it mean customers see CUPCAR in an even better light? Or could it have risks that actually It might devalue what the customers think of car. Would it stop some of their revenue streams? So changes in the business model, really important. Leadership. Well, we've got leadership in every one of the 214 dealerships. Some leaders might be good, some leaders might not be. Would we be able to understand where the leadership might be weak? And would we be able to recommend some improvements to that leadership style? Conflict. I've already mentioned conflict between some of the people who work at Car, because they've got different bonus schemes, because there's incentives to take on used cars at perhaps a too high a cost. And then what conflict between Car and the manufacturers? What about conflict, by the way, between Car and a customer? Negotiation. So negotiating to acquire a new company, negotiating to win a new contract to sell a new type of car. Digital disruption, highly tested in previous exam sittings. Often a question is where they propose that the company is going to do something. So something that involves a new website or a new use of big data or data analytics or some new technological advances, perhaps in the workshop of Car. And the question might be, evaluate whether this is a true digital disruption. So you need to understand what digital disruption means, and you then need to be able to go, right, well, this could be because it's doing this, but on the other hand, okay, managing performance. So things like performance appraisals, coaching, things like management styles, things like empowerment as well, building and managing teams. So there's lots of motivation and teams, sort of models and frameworks, aren't there, in E2, any of which might be useful to you when talking about how to build an effective team, regularly tested. So there's going to be a new website, and one of the tasks is how should Car go about building an effective team to develop the new website? So again, you're thinking about what you know about effective teams, but you're relating it back to Car. You're making sure that you're suggesting things in relation to Car. Management mentioned already, empowerment of staff. Is there a situation where some of the staff should be empowered to be able to make decisions that currently they don't make themselves? We need to think about the pros and cons of empowerment. Project management. If there's going to be a new website, if there's going to be a takeover of a company, it checks. So they could easily ask you about the project management process and how could this be project managed? Okay, then. So there's lots of good theories we've mentioned there from all three of the underpinning areas of knowledge that you need to have. So it's up to you to go back through all that knowledge yourself, and just to make sure that if you see a question in the exam for MCS that is about negotiation, conflict, teams, that you got some theory to structure your answer around. You've got some advantages, you've got some disadvantages, you've got some things to say. You won't be able to answer a question if you haven't got any knowledge, but you're not writing a textbook. So you really just need the essential knowledge, because then what you do with it is you apply it to Car. Okay, so what is your action plan then going forward? Here we go. What do you need to do? What you need to pass is, first of all, a good understanding of what the exam is actually about in terms of how many tasks, how many marks for each task, what are the timings I've got, what am I going to get on the day in terms of new information. Also, obviously, if you haven't done a case exam before with CIMA, the actual mechanics of doing the case exam on the computer. What's it going to look like? What am I going to be typing into? That's all important for you to make sure that you're happy with, so that it doesn't come as a shock to you on the day. You're going to need an excellent knowledge of those management level underpinning knowledge areas. So the things we mentioned today and others that were not on our slides, really good underpinning knowledge. Right, you need to understand exam technique. I think this is the most important blob on the slide. how to answer questions. And the mock exams that we have give you practice at doing that. The solutions clearly illustrate one answer to that. But what I would say is this: as with all questions about a business, there are many good answers. If we asked any business that you know, how would you deal with this negotiation with this particular supplier you've got, there would probably be a number of different suggestions. Your answer does not have to be the same as anybody else's answer in this exam, but your answer has to exhibit all of the things that a good answer has to have in it. And that's exam technique. So when you do the mock exams, whilst you might look at the answers and go, how does mine compare with that one? Actually, what you really need to be thinking about is, how does the exam technique shown in the answer compare with my exam technique? If you are on the elite course, when we do our workshops and we go through each mock, I will not answer the exam questions necessarily the same way as the answers are in our mock exam answers, because I like to do them, how I would do them. And I'll tell you how I would do it. You'll see there are different answers, but what you will also see is that the exam technique I use is the same every time. So that's really critical. Okay, next. We've already had a think about this. We need to know the pre-scene really well. We do have access to it on the day. So on the day, you can happily pull up the pre-scene, not yours, so not an annotated version, just the original one. But you will be able to look at that to remind yourself of things. We don't have to rote learn it. We need good time management. 3-hour exam, and you've got to make sure that you address each of the tasks within the time that you've got. You cannot run out of time. So time management, absolutely critical. Finally, you really have to have commitment. The exam is not a long way off. And all of this work that you need to do, you've really got to go, I'm going to put lots of other things on hold for the next few weeks to make sure that I can put enough time into this to pass. Fantastic when students, email or let us know that they've passed first time. That is marvellous. And there's nothing more sad than when a student says, I missed it. I didn't quite get it, because they've got to go through it all again. So lots of commitment right now to mastering all these 6 things on that screen to make sure that you do pass this first time. Okay. What is your own specific action plan? Well, obviously, it's down to you. You know how much time you've got. You know what your work commitments might be. You know what your family commitments are. So it's up to each student to make their own action plan. But here are some important suggestions. Number 1, make sure you've booked the exam. Once you've done it, it's the target. You know you're doing it. And once you've done that, you can become familiar with the details of the exam. Next, get that pre-scene thoroughly understood and thought about. Thinking about it is worth such a lot. Next, every week, go through theories from P2, F2, E2. Split them out, 1 each week, and go back and make sure that you could explain those key theories from each of those to somebody else, proving that you know what those theories are about. Week by week, attempt to mock and practice questions. And if you are attempting a mock, you have access to our answers. You can therefore learn from those. If you're doing the elite course, you'll be on a workshop where we'll go through my answers and you can obviously ask questions as well. So that's really vital. Doing mocks, absolutely vital. The Viva mocks are really excellent. Both the mocks themselves and the answers, fantastic. So you'll learn a huge amount by doing that. As you do the mock, it's really important, I say this to students who are studying all sorts of things, not just MCS, the point about doing questions is not just being able to say, oh yes, I've done lots of questions. The point about doing questions is going, I've just done 1 question now, and I'm going to learn where I was a bit weak. I'm going to work out what I could have done better. And in the next question I do, I'm going to make sure I do that. So when I then look at the second mock I do, and I look at the answer, hopefully I will have improved, but then I'll be able to pull out, okay, but I'm still weak in this bit. So it's about learning from each mock, and each week, each mock, you are doing better. Your timing's better, you're quicker at thinking, you're better at planning, you've got the exam technique really, really nailed. Keep going back through key theories, keep going back through the pre-seen, keep making sure that you're not letting anything slip. You know, the more thinking about all of it you can do, the better. Okay, final points here then. Practice makes perfect, so get on with those mocks. Don't be afraid about making mistakes. Just go for it. You know, get something down on paper. Then you've got something to go, okay, I could do that a bit better. So don't be scared of it. Just go for it. Mocks, it's a starting point to build on. The important part of making mistakes is to learn. And that's the idea. As you go through the weeks and you're going through the mocks, we are getting better and better and better. Okay, then. So in closing, this is a very passable exam. It's about applying your knowledge to things, and it's about using your common sense. And you would not be at this point in your CIMA studies if you didn't have common sense. Very possible. But you've got to prepare and you've got to practice. If you feel confident right now, the next thing I'd say to you is draft yourself a study plan. Get yourself your own personal study plan, book the exam. Start by revising the management syllabus and reviewing the pre-seen document. Make sure that you are practicing questions and building in those mocks. Make sure that after each mock, and if you do the elite course, the workshop will help do this, that you look at what you did, you look at the answers, you look at another way you could have answered it, and you understand where you went well, got a good feedback from the marker, and where you didn't. So if you're on the elite course, you get your mocks marked, you'll see where you did well, you'll see where perhaps there was some negative feedback. Take time to understand those. We can talk through those in the workshop, and then you'll do better next time. And finally, if you're really going for this MCS exam then, and I hope you all are, obviously we would be wishing you all very, very good luck with that exam. I hope that many of you will be joining us on the standard course, where you're going to get all of those recordings and notes and mocks, and you'll hear me in all of those recordings. I'm hoping that others of you will join us for the live workshops on the elite course. That would be fantastic. And in those workshops, you'll be able to ask me lots of questions as we go along. So that's all great. So, you know, we are here to help, but whether you're with us or you're not, really good luck. And hopefully, you know, today will have put you on the right track. So obviously, you know, thank you for attending. If you've got any questions after this to do with courses at Viva or the MCS specifically at Viva, then there's the email address for you to contact us. But what I'm going to say now is, does anybody have any questions? So I'm just looking at the... Okay, so I'm just looking at the questions I can see so far in the chat and in the Q&A. So I can see that Thomas has put the links in the chat that he said he would. And the slides, I do believe that we share these slides with you. Yep. So I think that if you registered for this, we have your email address, and I do believe that we will be sharing those slides with you. We're also recording it, and yep, we will be sharing that recording as well. So you'll all get the slides and the recording. And the Q&A is asking the same questions, so that's good. Has anybody else got any questions to ask me? Is there anything about what I've said tonight that you're not sure about? So do we have any template study plans? So if you do join either of our courses, the standard or the elite, we do have a sort of schedule. Yeah. So we do have sort of recommended schedule with what to do when, that sort of builds through to the exam. So that would be something that you would get if you come on either of our courses. If not, you know, what I would say is you now know what to do. So look at the time before the exam, you know, work out how many weeks you've got and start breaking that down into what you're going to revise from E2F to P2, what questions you're going to practice, and build your own study plan. Okay, any other questions? What Bobbin over there? So, good question there. What is the pass mark? Basically, think of it as you've got to get about 60%. If you get about 60% then you're going to pass this exam. Okay, that's how it works. The exam itself has 8 tasks, and they've got percentages by them, and it's not easy to correlate that to specific marks. But if you think to yourself, you know, if I'm aiming for 60%, then I'm going to pass. That's what we're thinking about. Okay. Ludo, your question, I don't know the answer to that, but that would be one that you could ask. There we go. info@vivatuition.com would be the place to go with that question. All right then, folks. So, David, I can see your question. Is the pass rate very different from the first quarter to the second quarter? So, in other words, is it very different from, say, November to Feb? I'm presuming is what you're meaning. So, obviously, this car came out in November, so everybody's had one go at it for November, and obviously it's been retested in February. Are the pass rates very different? I would say overall, no. But obviously, what you do have in the Feb sitting is anybody who failed it in November is obviously going to be resitting it in February. Whereas you might not get that, and it's the same case for them. So there will be a lot more resitters with experience of CART who are sitting it in February. So it is a bit different in terms of the type of student sitting it. But overall, I would say the pass rate isn't that different. But what I would say is, you know, as an individual, don't worry about the pass rate. The pass rate is what happens when you put a load of individuals' results together. You need to pass it. So knowing how to do that, absolutely vital. So, you know, the things we've said tonight, absolutely vital for you to make sure that you pass it. Okay. I've seen one more. Here we go. Do we have to wait until the Feb sittings complete to see suggested answers for the November exams? So if you join the standard class for this, then you will have access to the mock exams and the suggested answers. Oh, yeah, you mean the CIMA ones, Tracy? Yes, you're not going to see any answers to the November real exams until after you've sat your February exams. Yes, that is the case. CIMA won't let you see them because obviously that would give you a pretty good clue about what's come up then and wouldn't come up again. So we aren't going to have any of that, sadly. Okay. So the person who's asked me about how do I know if I've written enough, that one, I'm going to give you an answer, which is this. You have got 45 minutes for each task, and each task is split into 2. So basically, you've got 45 minutes with which to answer 2 questions. And I would always say, out of those 45 minutes, a third of it should be thinking and planning the answer. 2/3 of it should be writing. That is how I can tell you the amount you need to write. You need to be making sure that you can write enough in the time you've got available. And when they give you these tasks, they'll tell you if it's a sort of 40% task or a 50% task. So one task will be 2 items that add up to 100%. So you might get a 40% and a 60%. I usually say if it's a 40%, you need 3 or 4 separate points that you've written about. And if it's a 60%, you need 5 or 6. So it's about being able to write that many points in the time available. So it is a bit different from a normal exam. And that's why, to be honest, doing the mock exams, and if you could be on our elite course, that would be great. You know, we can go through that type of thing and we'll be able to see how I would have done it and how I would manage my time to do that, because it is a bit of a challenge. So that's a very good question. Okay, I think that's at the end of the questions. Let me just check. Yep, can't see any more questions. So if that is the end of the questions, then I'll say, well done for attending today. You know, this is the starting point, isn't it? You've kicked off your studies. Well done. And from here on in, get that action plan together for yourself, personal action plan. Remember, the question practice is vital. schedule out what you're going to do when. And if some of you are on our standard courses, you'll hear me again in the recordings. And if you're on the elite courses, I will see you in the forthcoming workshops. So well done for this evening and for taking the time out to join us, and good luck with your exam. Bye for now, everybody. Thank you very much for attending.